Okay, everybody, this is Mike Griffith with Take Your Best Shot, and today we're going to talk a little mental health, and we've got our guest, Randy May, with us, and thanks for coming in, Randy.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Now, what, in your opinion, is mental health? Really? Because it's thrown out today in a lot of different ways for a lot of different things, and what is mental health?
Well, I guess, I would start with just kind of the base definition as just your day-to-day. I mean, for me, it's always been more about emotions, but for a lot of people, it's the stressors in their life. It's actual events, circumstances that affect everything. And, I've always told people, obviously, I've had some big incidences in my life, but I try to tell people that even if you're not diagnosed with anything, you're a couple of bad things away from a huge break.
Really?
And that's everybody. Yeah, absolutely. I think if you have a couple of traumatic events happening simultaneously or in a close period of time, you're gonna see and feel things that other people they'll call a breakdown or something like that, or a panic attack. But mental health to me is just kind of it comes from inside. Like, if you are living life the way you think you should be and want to be, I think you're gonna do okay, even if you've been diagnosed or labeled with this and that. And I think kind of the collection of things that work against you is if you're not living life how you truly want to be. If you, follow the path that was set forth from early on, and that's not the path for you, I think it eventually is going to blow up in your face. People that, we're all told to go to high school and go to college and, get a good job and get married and have kids and have that house in the suburbs or whatever. And if that wasn't your path, if that's not truly for you, you're going to have some mental health issues. Like, I truly believe that for everyone. And if you have the education and the mind to do whatever, or even just the mind, you don't need the education, but you don't want to use it. If you want to be an Uber or a Lyft driver and that makes you happy, that's what you should do.
Well, absolutely. Now, you've been diagnosed with bipolar?
Yeah, so I'm diagnosed bipolar affective disorder. Which is like proven over multiple times. So when it comes to bipolar, you'll hear bipolar type 1, bipolar type 2. So I'm diagnosed bipolar type 1.
And what is type 1?
So type 1 is if you have a manic episode. That's pretty much, you'll become bipolar and labeled bipolar if you go through a manic episode. And that's characterized by, mania, which is, everybody knows, I think, what depression feels like to some degree. Sadness, kind of feeling of worthlessness, powerlessness, whatever, where you don't want to get up in the morning, don't want to face the day.
I don't know about that. I've never experienced that.
Well, then you are a small percentage.
Really? Because I just feel like everybody's like me, and then I'm surprised when they're not.
I don't think so. Yeah, I think people deal with a lot of, at least at some point in life, like things aren't going your way, or you face a breakup, or a job doesn't go the right way. And people will feel that kind of like, I want to shelter myself, especially in Minnesota, where we have these awful winters.
Yeah. So what is a manic attack, or what is that? I mean, how is that defined, and then how does it affect you?
So a manic episode, you can easily see the symptoms like online, right? You'll see, like, they always say the first thing to go is judgment. So, you'll start making decisions that aren't exactly characteristic to you in your kind of normal everyday life. Things that come with it are like, they'll say like racing thoughts, and like thoughts of grandeur, delusions of grandeur is the kind of term they'll use. For me, it's a slow ramp up for me. So, I'll get I'll take people on, I'll take authority on, in my job, in my, relationships, whatever. And then eventually it's starting to kind of act on those things. So you're bad with money, you just start blowing money, you come up with ideas that you just have to see out. A lot of people, I think, and for me too, you'll head somewhere, you'll head south or something. Obviously I have access to flight benefits now for a few years, but before that it was like a trip to Florida, or something like that, or just get in my car. I drove to California a couple of times. So mania, it's the things that you won't hear so much is, what's happened after it is a reset of your life. For me, I would it would wreck everything. I always say I've gone through 3 manic episodes and kind of 3 hit the reset button in life, and those for me were at 18, 21, and 26. And because for me, I just got rid of all my possessions. Blew through money because it wasn't important. Literally, like, throw out everything I had in my room or apartment or wherever I was living and, like, get down to the bare bones because I thought those kind of held me back. Like, there was this thought in my head that these possessions kind of somewhat control you or something. But yeah, you'll just kind of chase ideas, and you start, for me, it's not hallucinations so much. I never saw things that really weren't there. But once I get into those upper echelons of kind of true mania, like, you really have some strange ideas. And I've told people numerous times that there's some, if you want to experience mania, like, imagine the best day you had in your life. Maybe it was you got laid, or you got a promotion, or you won, $500 in pull tabs or something. And then drink, 10 cups of coffee or 5 Red Bulls or whatever. And then you won the lottery. When you're at your peak of mania and at the peak of that the enjoyment feeling, because you can pitch up and down during it, it's just this ultimate, like, I feel purposeful, I feel elated, that's a word they'll always use, happy. And you don't sleep much, that's another symptom, and you're just going, like, constantly.
How long does that last?
So for me, it was a ramp up so like my last episode was in 2012 and 2013, and it was a slow process up where you can start to see some things. Like, I was a graduate assistant at St. Cloud State, so I got to teach a class at one point. I was grading papers, and I started arguing with my professors because it's like they wanted me to, I was supposed to be on for like 20 hours a week of schoolwork, and they started trying to give me more, and I'm like grading online tests where teachers aren't doing shit. And so I'll just start taking them on. I'm like, this is fucking bullshit. Like, why am I trying to do 40 hours a week, getting paid some of my tuition and like a little minimal check every 2 weeks or whatever? So I got fired from that. They were so, I think, scared of me that I had an office key and a building key. They had me slide them under the door after hours. So losing that job had a big effect. And then once you start getting up a little, and things start affecting you more and more. So, you'll start to take people on. And I lost my job. And I came back the following semester and didn't really tell anybody and just kind of stayed under the radar. But then I actually chased an ex that had moved to Florida. And, that change from winter to just super summer, beautiful weather also plays a role. So I went down there, and for me, that kind of launched me into another atmosphere, another layer of altitude, and I was just kind of completely elated. So this is, I got fired in the fall. I went down there in probably April, and then I was running around because she'd have to work, and I would take her car and just kind of drive around and do whatever and talk to people. And I had started texting somebody. It was a female. And eventually she was home, and I was home. My ex, and I was cleaning her car or something, right? Because I have to stay busy. And she saw some texts that were not great. But for me, if you see words when I'm super manic that are loving or something, it doesn't mean relationship love. It's just kind of Jesus, that kind of bullshit love. And she saw that and kicked me up. And I had, a ton of stuff with me. So I packed it in my army bag, and I just started walking. And I started shedding stuff. It's still hot at night. Just started losing shit along the way. I walked 15-20 miles.
Where were you going?
I was just walking towards downtown Tampa. She lived in the North Tampa region, which was not a great area, but so I just kind of had this idea that I would head towards the city center and I'd find something there. Along the way, I kind of shed everything. Eventually kind of ran out of steam, and I ended up at their historical society, and it got kind of cold once you kind of stopped moving. It was probably maybe upper 50s or something, and I ended up sleeping over a light because it was warm, and just kind of passed out by their little inlet or river stream there. And once I slept, I kind of get recharged off minimal sleep, so it was 2 or 3 hours, and then I was able to charge my phone and give her a call because I was pretty broken at that point. I was pretty oh, okay, I ran through this, and I didn't know who else to call. It kind of discarded my money or whatever. So she came and picked me up, and I went. She took me like a hotel for the night, and then I, slept a little more, and then boom, I'm off to the races again. And I had been dropped there at the airport at one point. My brother had like rebooked my ticket, but my dad had dumbly called the police, kind of made them aware. And so she sat with me in the parking lot for a little while, and then all of a sudden she left, and I just got surrounded by cops, like literally like a military operation. And obviously in my mind, this is happening for other reasons, like they're aware of me and blah blah blah. I'm calling attention just because whatever pulses I'm setting out into the world. So then they kind of escorted me down to the ticketing area, and I think it wasn't so important to them, like, oh, he's here. But me, like, oh, I need to go to the bathroom, and like I escaped, right? Like I fucking bolt down the back door and down to the baggage level, catch a cab and get out of there. So then I'm off to the races again. So yeah, the process of like true mania, I guess, back to your original question, is like it can last a month or two until you get hospitalized. So eventually with this whole Tampa, Florida thing, she grabbed me again the next night, and we stayed at a hotel, but I took off in the morning with her car to go like run to the gas station. But then ideas enter my head, and I just keep going, and hours pass. So she calls the cops, and they're getting calls all around because I'm just drifting through the city streets of Tampa. Luckily, I didn't cross a cop during that time because that would have been bad. But eventually, I stopped, and like a wave of cop cars come in, and then she what's called Baker acted me in Florida, so they didn't arrest me. They took me to a mental health facility. So I was trapped there for about 9-10 days. Eventually, they let me out to get me back home.
What do you mean by trapped?
Well, I mean I was locked up in a mental health facility, so it's not like I'm free.
But you were there against your will.
Of course.
Okay.
Yep. They released me, and I flew home, and it's not like I had an escort or anything. So I got home. My sister picked me up from the airport, brought me to a friend that was going to bring me to St. Cloud, where I was living at the time, brought me back up there, and I was just off to the races again. So there was probably another 3 weeks of just kind of running around doing whatever. I was living with a couple that were just great, Marie and Derek, some of my good friends, and finally my dad, I didn't have a phone. My dad contacted this Maria, and she's like, well, it sounds like your dad's calling an emergency response team. And to me, that sounds like SWAT team.
Right.
So I like pick up like a golf club and a bat. Like, not like I'm going to fight them, but these are just something in my head had told me, these sports tools are like my defense, like my staff kind of thing. And I just head kind of what I know. I walked down to the river where I used to have an apartment building that I like built a little bonfire pit on the river's edge. And all of a sudden, I'm there probably 20 minutes. I think I jumped in the water because I was just kind of overheating. And because I was swimming the Mississippi every day when I lived there. And all of a sudden, like, I'm getting dressed, and I hear, like an unlocking of something. And it's a cop behind me with a gun. And he's like, hey, you have to come with us, put the club down. Because I had, like, picked up my golf club, right? Like, I didn't see him. And I was like, okay. I dropped the club. Like, luckily, I didn't pick that moment to fight. And luckily, I've never kind of, when I've interacted with police, never resisted. So then I got grabbed, and I was in the hospital for a good 3 months where they just medicate the fuck out of you. And then, after these manic episodes, for me, it's always been the biggest depressions, the lowest depressions, and then I have to kind of build myself back up.
So you peak.
Yep.
You peak where you are, nobody can touch you.
Nobody.
No. And then you crash. It's not a slow climb down. It's like jumping off a cliff.
Well, I've always used the analogy, which is funny, I worked in the airlines for so long now, is like a plane. For me, everybody, if they're flying at 30,000 or 10,000, whatever plane you're in, you're fine, right? But when I start to gain altitude, 35, 40,000, and I get up so high, their only means of taking me down is to shell me out of the sky. So here comes my plane, crashes on the ground, and then explodes, and it's in a million pieces. And I have to pick those pieces up because, the medications and the hospitalization are not a great process. Like, it's a nightmare. The things you see on TV, mostly not true, but it's awful. I had somebody close to me recently that was actually in a hospital that I had been in the past. I went and visited, and 2-3 days for this person was like a nightmare. And I was like,
Right.
yeah, I was here for, a month, and then I was moved to another place for a couple of months.
So let me ask you this. You had your first one at 18.
Yep.
How did that come about? Did you have ones when you were younger, but you didn't know it?
Mm-hmm.
Or did this one at 18 just come out of nowhere?
So what happened was, starting in like 7th grade, I would get depressed, and like to the point where I wouldn't go to school. Like I wouldn't face the day. I just wanted to crawl up in my room and not be heard from. I remember fantasizing like I wanted to, have the dog's life, where I just sleep and eat and not bothered kind of. And there's no real responsibility. And they would take me out of quarters of school and then start me in the next quarter, and usually that kind of reset it. Come high school, I started to get a little more elevated, but never to the point where I really got out of control. I would come down on my own and go into depression. So I would get real, like, everybody knew me at the school. I was this big presence until I would kind of turn the corner. And when I was younger, it was usually associated with the seasons. And they kind of told me that was the way, you have seasonal affective disorder. And so I think you start to believe that somewhat. So then all of a sudden winter approaching is a scary thing. You believe it enough and it takes you down. So that was kind of the first signs. When I was 18, I lived with my mom. I hadn't graduated high school. I didn't graduate my class because I had missed so many quarters, and I was just like, I'm not going to try to screw it. So I went up to St. Cloud where a friend was after my mom kicked me out of the house because I had been stealing checks from her.
Dude.
That's the truth.
Well, no, that's good. I want to hear this.
Yeah, and so I went up to St. Cloud, stayed in my buddy's dorm room, which his roommate was rarely there. My friend's name's Brooks. And then I had another friend, like a bunch of friends, because I went to St. Cloud State, and I was from Champlin in Brooklyn Park, and so a lot of people went up there. So I would crash on couches and floors, and eventually I saw this ad. It was for an apartment building, move in for $75. That was the hold. So my dad pretty much funded me living there. So this is back to 2004. And I tried to get a job and worked at AutoZone for a minute or two, but I would mostly just have this apartment. I'd go play hockey every day. I'd go skate at the pond at the city building, which was right next to me. It was in St. Cloud off of I would live at Forest View Apartments. But then it kind of, I actually got my GED during this time of mania. My dad, he kind of pushed that. My dad's a retired community college math professor, so education's always been important to him. And I was like, well, I'll do that, because he wanted to see something coming out of, what I'm doing. So I showed up to the education center or whatever, and I said, I take the GED, and they're like, oh, we have it next week. So I got the check from my dad and gave it to them. And they're like, well, you have to schedule, multiple test days to get through this. And I was like, no, I don't. So I took the entire GED in one sitting, and it took me 2.5 hours, and I, passed in the 95th percentile of everything, because I don't know, I'm smart.
Well, you might be too smart for your own good, dude.
Yeah. That's always,
what I mean?
That's always a worry. So after that, I continued to kind of dick around, and I would get student IDs from friends and go to hockey games, and I was a big presence there.
Did you ever go down to the red carpet?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, shit, I could tell you a million stories from the red carpet of the press, or even DBs. Now it's closed, and but
well, I went to St. Cloud my freshman year.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. I was in Sherburne Hall.
Yep. The tall one.
And I think we were on the 5th or 6th floor.
Tallest building for whatever, they always say 25 miles or something crap.
Something like that. But anyways, go ahead with your story.
So I was going to hockey games and getting into some trouble around campus. I'd go to the pawn shop.
And you weren't even a student.
No. So as long as I grabbed a student ID, at St. Cloud State, still to this day, you can go to the Division I hockey games for free. And that's my entire life. I loved hockey. I loved, being at the games. I've played since I was, probably 4 years old, 3 years old, whatever. And eventually I got into some trouble around campus. So I, because I would go to the pawn shop and buy just random shit. So I bought a bullhorn once, which, so I'm going up, to my buddy's dorm, actually Sherburne, and I was like, attention.
So you turned into the super fan.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, absolutely, at the
I mean?
hockey games. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that came back once I was actually a student there. But yeah, so I had this bullhorn, and at one point I was went up to Sherburne Hall, actually, and I was like, attention everyone. I was like, Dan Morelli is a faggot. This is my friend, right? And this is just echoing around town. So eventually they kind of got wind of me. and like brought me, like I had applied for public safety because, you know, just disconnect of what I should be not making myself known to these people. And they're like, well, do you ever go to hockey games? I was like, yeah. It's like, how do you do that? Well, I don't know, I borrow a student ID. And I think I had it on me, and I think they grabbed it from me. And it was at that point, they're like, you cannot be on campus. And so I was like, well, fuck, now that was taken from me, so I just looked for another escape. So I joined the U.S. Army. So I went in on like probably January or like late January, and I was shopping out the branches because I'd always imagined, you know, some kind of aviation something, right? And the Army, you know, then for me it became like, who's taking me the fastest? Like, how did Dad get out of here? The Army's like, we can push you through. And so I went down to like MEPS to be qualified or, you know, do the medical, and they didn't approve me for active Army, but I got like a reservist position. And they're like, we can ship you out in 2-3 weeks. I was like, let's go. So I come back to my recruiters, and they're like, sorry you didn't get it. And I have all this, like, you know, these little gifts and shit, this gift bag. And they're like, why do you have those? I was like, well, I got signed to be a reservist. And they're like, oh, okay. Because that's not as, like, big of a bonus for them or some shit, or checks off their list. So, boom, I shipped out to the Army. And in basic, I was 18. I was in great shape before I went. I was playing hockey every day. And, you know, then the Army, the first 3 weeks, it's all push-ups and jumping jacks and marches and everything where, like, and they're feeding me right. So I'm just turning to this super, like, lean, you know, just ready to go at any point. You know, I remember I was able to do, like, 12 pull-ups at one point, which is a big deal for me. Like, I'm a 6'5" lanky, you know, bastard. Right. And so they, the drill sergeants would kind of pick on me because I would stand out. I went to Fort Jackson, and we had females there. And yeah, at one point, we got smoked. You know, that's when you get put down and, like, have to do push-ups or something. So we're all, like, doing push-ups, and there's this girl that's, like struggling, and she's, like, moaning. You know, she's like, and I was like, you know, I start laughing a little bit. And we're standing at this point, because I think some of the girls got, you know, smoked separately, and this drill sergeant comes down to me, and he's like, you think that's funny, Private May? And I was like, no, drill sergeant. And then he starts, like, hitting me with his brown, round-rimmed hat, like, in the eye. You know, like, you think that's funny. Like, he's not hitting me with, you know, his hands or anything, but I'm, like, getting pecked in the eye. He's like, how about now? Is it still funny? I was like, no, drill sergeant, because, you know, I have tears rolling down because it hurts and it's hitting me in the eye. And then they continued to target me because I was, like, the nail that was sticking out. And so they at one point put me...
Now, were they really targeting you, or did you just think they were?
No, they really were, because, you know, I would talk back. And I would, like, be like, this is ridiculous, and laugh at some shit, and, like, you know, because I didn't take it that seriously. So at one point they put me on this special assignment where, like, it was just me. And I had to put a company post in the ground. And this thing was like a telephone pole. And they gave me a little tea shovel, which is like a gardening shovel size. And I had to dig in this, like, bedrock earth. I mean, it was like digging into a mountainside. And so I'm, like, just dying, like, it's hurting. But I get down, like, 3-4 feet. I roll this fucking tree trunk in the end of it into this hole. And then I go to the end of it and walk up it, right? Mm-hmm. And eventually lift it in. And, you know, got it in. Like, here's the company post they had me put up. So I did it. And they gave me enough sleep that night because they known what they did. So I slept... The most I'd slept probably since I'd been there, I slept like 8 hours. And with that, I was just recharged, and I was just like, let's go. And so eventually, like, I kind of got, I got frustrated, and I wanted to escape again. I don't want to be trapped in something. So I'm just like, I got to get out of here. So I made up something with my knee, which is actually true. Like, I've always had a knee problem. And when I would sit cross-legged, it would get kind of tight and hurt. And they're like, I was like, hey, you know, I got this problem with my knee. Can I go to a doctor or sick call or whatever? And they're like, sure. So they signed off, and they gave me these sheets to let me walk across, like, maybe a half mile to the medical area, a hospital or clinic or whatever. And on the way, I put having racing thoughts because I knew what I was doing, and I was like, I'll find a way out. So I go meet with this medical doctor, and, you know, I'll never forget this. His name was Dr. Fulton, and he talks to me for about a half hour, 40 minutes, and he's like, he said what you said just a little bit ago. He says, you're too smart for the Army, Randy, and I know what you're doing here, but I'll help you out. And you got to promise me one thing in life. Promise me you won't give up on something in the future. I said, yeah, I'll promise you that. So he made an appointment with she was a major that was like a psychiatrist or something. So I got this appointment, like my plan's working, right? So I go back to the barracks and get back into the swing of things, and I'm at like chow the next day or lunch or whatever, and all of a sudden the drill sergeant, which this guy, he was actually the first sergeant, he looked like a black bear, gold tooth, like been shot like 13 times. Like this guy was the real deal. And he stops us and he starts walking through the tables, like the lunch hall tables, and he's like, "Attention everyone." Like he sounded terrifying. And he stopped right behind me. He said, "Attention everyone, all appointments have been canceled." And I was like, "Oh fuck." Like
you got busted.
Fucked. So like we get out of lunch and we do like sprints, push-ups with our rifle, whatever, and then I get back to formation. I break down. Like I'm crying, like fuck, like I'm stuck, And so I'm kind of broken the rest of that day, and all of a sudden I get a call. And they're like, "Hey, you have a call." I was like, "What? Like, how do I have a call?" And so it's this major. And I was like, "Well, my first sergeant said all appointments were canceled," and I figured that applied to me. She's like, "No, I outrank him. Just be at the fucking appointment." So I go there, and I literally just list off every symptom I know of bipolar, maybe. And she's like, at the end, she's like, "I think you're bipolar." And I was like, "Yeah. Really?" So I got out of the Army based on, they just gave me a general discharge because they didn't want to say like, that I had falsified, because I'd never been diagnosed yet. But I'd obviously flirted and people had thought it was this or that. And so I was able to get out, and they put me in like this discharge company, and eventually I was returned home. And then obviously I was off to the moon because I had a vehicle, I had some money from the Army. I was in crazy ass shape and just no fear at this point at all, because like I just learned how to kill people and stuff, and so I just took off in my car. Like I tried to live in my dad's cabin for a little bit, but he didn't want me like inside, so I was literally living in like the cellar of a cabin, like open the big ass barn door. And it was cool because he had a bed down there, like extra shit, like shit that wasn't being used. He had 2 Technique speakers, like, the giant ones.
The tall ones.
Yep. And then there was a CD player, so I could hook up all that shit. And I'm just blowing this, cellar, like, the cement barriers were moving. And like, so I did that, and I stayed in a tent when he was there, just so he like didn't see me going into his cellar kind of thing. But eventually, that kind of expired, and I took off to California because I was like, I gotta go further. Drove out there.
So when you came back from the Army,
yep,
you started in this manic because you were in elation.
Well, I was pretty much already there, like before, the whole time in St. Cloud, where I'm just running around being the center of attention at hockey games and like, buying stupid shit at the pawn shop and, yelling and just being loud. I'm already kind of exercising.
But when did you get to that 50,000 feet?
When I was way, way up would have been, when I came home.
Yeah.
I was still able to control things in the Army where I'm still in charge. I've told people in the past, like, once you get way up, like you said, 50,000 feet or something, it's like watching your life through a camera recorder. You're there, but you have no control. Like, you're behind the camera, like you're looking into it. So something else is in control at that point.
But what's in control? Because to me, I got to be honest with you. For me,
yep.
I've never had that feeling.
Oh, of course not.
I don't know what that's like. So when I hear you say it, it almost comes across as maybe like you're making an excuse.
Sure.
But
so
tell me what that means.
What was in control? It was, the thing is, like, my mind is the thing that's ill, right? And that's what takes control. Like, if I feed this mania enough, it's like the Hulk comes up, and once the Hulk's out, if obviously all the Marvel movies and Bruce Banner, like, he's no longer in control. There's something else that takes over. And the mania is so powerful that, once, you feed it for a while, and once it's out, and once you're at that 50,000 foot point, like, I'm present, but I'm no longer there. People that have seen me in that state could kind of tell you, like, I'm all like emotion and all like, just, it's very, you can sense my presence kind of thing. One of the weirder things in a later episode is one of my best friends, Chris Norton, had a house in St. Cloud, and I had, come around, and I was I was pretty just raw. Like this, just like your instincts. It's no more like reasoning. You know, it's just raw, instinctual drive. And this dog was like coming around, and we're sitting by his garage smoking or something, talking. And this dog was like happy, right? Comes up to him and like, oh, hi, you know, and like pet me. And it like looks towards me and starts approaching, and head down, tail down, and it just goes the other way. Like
so it sensed something.
Yes. Yep. And that was like one thing that was like, you know, I guess to try to describe, you know, what mania is like, it's just imagine all those baser instincts and baser, like, you know, emotions and feelings that's completely taking control. So it's something that very few people will experience.
So I have a friend from about 20 years ago who's very conservative, and he was diagnosed with bipolar.
Sure.
And very conservative, upstanding guy. But he was diagnosed after he had a manic episode.
Sure.
He was running down the street naked.
Oh, yeah. Fun shit.
People were like, who are you? Because people started questioning him, because he was this guy that was
conservative,
very upstanding, very conservative, very, how should you put it? Calm.
Sure.
This was so far out of his personality.
Yeah.
That something happened and snapped.
Yeah.
And he's literally running down the street. Buck naked.
Yep.
And
that's exactly, you know, that gives you kind of a window into, you know, what this can do. So, you know, I tell people that if you, like I told you earlier, if you were to experience it, you'd have to go through a couple things that kind of either, you know, broke you first, you know, but then imagine adding all those things that I said, like winning the lottery and, you know, drinking a ton of caffeine. Like imagine being broken emotionally, like the worst things that happen, you had a parent or spouse pass away, and then, or you got fired or whatever, and then like this magical feeling, you know, after that. So it takes kind of that stuff to get there. But yeah, the mania, it's not without its, you know, it's not without fun and like.
So you've had 3 episodes.
Yeah.
What, if any, was a common denominator in each 3? Was there something that sparked it, or was it just a gradual lift and then you could never return back?
So yeah, for me it's a gradual lift, but then there are certainly things that spark along the way. So for me it was usually a relationship breaking, and then also it was cars breaking down. Like strangely, like that vehicle for my freedom, if that all of a sudden was taken away from me or broken or something, that would kind of, you know, keep me trapped enough to like all of a sudden it would explode out of me, right? Because I'm keeping that kind of monster at bay by being able to, you know, drive 70 miles per hour and get away from things and bring the speed of the world up to the speed of my mind. So it was usually like, you know, a relationship break or something, or like I fired from my graduate assistantship. So it's stuff like that, or from, you know, in the Army, I drove out to California, my car broke down. I traded my 98 Volkswagen Jetta for an 85 Pontiac Fiero and a few $100.
A Fiero.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that in a long time.
And I made it back.
Did you actually fit in that car?
I did not. I did enough, but I don't have money for accommodation, so I'm sleeping in this fucking Fiero, and like that thing doesn't rock black. There's no recline to that seat.
No, there's nothing.
So I'm like wedged at a 90-degree angle, but I made it back, and then that car died. So it's like, you know, I had this journey, you know, out to California and back, but then all of a sudden that vehicle's taken. So that was kind of the final thing where, you know, this is the last straw. Boom, it's out.
So when you crash,
yep,
are there suicidal thoughts? Are there
God.
What kind of thoughts is in your head when you crash?
You know, the crashing is the hospital taking you down. It's getting pumped full of Haldol and Seroquel and, you know, any concoction of antipsychotics. Like I've been, you know, hit with a massive amount of all of them. So they bring you down. It's the drugs, you know. It's not like it's just me that all of a sudden I'm sad and like I'm like that. It doesn't come down on my own. Like they drug the shit out of me, and I'm confined to a building or a floor of a building.
Now, are you strapped in with chains?
No,
and all that,
no,
or
that's mostly bullshit. Like the only time you ever get, like, there are like padded rooms, but they don't look like the movies. You're not in this white padded fucking room. But, you know, is a room if you get kind of out of control and they're worried about the safety of the other, you know, people in the psych institution, they'll put you in there for a little bit. That happened like once. So for the most part, just imagine a hospital wing, except for the doors, you know, are a little different.
They don't open from the inside?
Well, you can't get out of the ward. Your bedroom door will open and stuff. Like, you're not trapped in there. But you have a roommate. I mean, that's the crazy shit about this thing. You rarely...
So it's not like the Cuckoo's Nest.
No. It's...
I know that's a movie, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Yeah, it's not like the movies. You know, there are some things that are. But, you know, I've definitely gotten hit with a shot in the ass enough times. Like, one time I was arguing, you know, with, like, the desk lady. And I was just like, you know, give me your attention. Like, this is this and this. And all of a sudden, orderlies grab me. They're not in all white and some shit, you know, they're just dressed in scrubs like everybody else, and just down the pant leg and just boom, you know, the B-52 shot or whatever they call it. And then I'm, you know, back to kind of lethargic or taken down.
So take me down the path.
Sure.
You've had these episodes, you've experienced that, and it's been about 6 years now since your last one.
Yeah.
You must have some kind of support system in place today.
Yeah.
Or not, I don't know. But
so, absolutely. So, you know, I got out of the hospital in August of 2013. I'll go back to your question earlier, like suicidal thoughts. So, post-mania, you know, especially I'll go over my last one in 2013. I was lucky enough, my friend Chris moved me into his place without, like, he's like, pay me rent when you can. And I went back to school, my graduate degree, just because I had access to student loans. You know, I didn't have a support network from the government or my parents, really. You know, they would help when they could, like, here's some money. But they didn't offer to, come live with us. We cleared out a bedroom kind of thing. But that following 6, 8, 9, 10 months, I thought about killing myself every day.
Really?
Every day. You know, all I would do is I would stay up late, maybe 3, 4, sleep all fucking day, sleep till 2 p.m. I took 1 or 2 classes, just enough, and I would go to those just enough, you know, that was keeping me going. But yeah, I got a little piece of shit Honda Civic, and I would, you know, think about lining that thing up with a bridge truss or a street light, you know, something that I could drive into at about, you know, 100 miles per hour, whatever that thing would go up to.
Yeah, you know Pat Cox?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, he told me that he had those thoughts too.
Oh my God, it was powerful. You know, I remember dates even because, like, I'm going to kill myself on 11, 12, 13. At least the numbers, magical.
You know that is my start date at Delta Airlines.
Ah, that's funny.
11, 12, 13.
Yeah.
Now, it would have been bad if you killed yourself on that day.
Yeah, I would have never had to work at Delta Airlines. Oh, wait, sorry.
But let me go back. You know, the suicidal thoughts, though, I mean, were they real or were they just thoughts?
Oh, yeah, I mean,
like you were
obviously I never...
planning the execution of them?
Oh, absolutely. So I never did it. You know, I never made an attempt, but I certainly was lined up. You know, I had that car on my the road that I had planned to slam in. I can tell you the road's name. You know, it was River Avenue North in Sauk Rapids. There's these large, under the bridge there's these large rocks that they kind of just moved as barriers. I was going to come cooking down that thing at 85, 90, what I'd get up to, and just slam into it.
And that little Honda Civic wouldn't have provided much cushion for you.
Oh, yeah. You know, I would have been splatted like a bug on that rock. So, you know, there was that. Yeah, I never owned a gun in this time, thank God, because that would have been too easy. You know, I thought about slit my throat and stuff like that, but just never got to it. You know, either I just procrastinated or, like, it snowed and I couldn't drive my car without fearing I would slip out, you know, and, like, I'd end up in a worse situation, you know. So eventually, like, that was the toughest winter of my life. I had a couple of real bad things happen. My brother actually went into an episode. My brother's also bipolar. He went in an episode in January of 2014, a full manic episode. He was calling me, telling me about the blood moon and this and that shit, and ruining. He had 2 kids at the time. You know, ruining his marriage and his career and all of his savings and stuff. And so the family's looking to me for help, and
you're not in a position.
No. And then I had a couple of relationships at that point in my life. One with the ex I had chased down to Florida, who, like, was a saint, who helped, like, came and visited me at the hospital every day when I was in Florida and brought me things, cigarettes and socks or clothes or whatever. But then I went back to I'd, like, wrecked her car during this, you know, for the most part. It's still drivable, but it was pretty wrecked. My parents had sent her money for that, their family money, but like, I had kind of, you know, believed that was going to come back in the field. And then she came in December of 2013 to visit for a day. And I was so fucking depressed that, you know, I couldn't muster up the courage to really kind of say anything. And she had just met some guy and that I could tell he was like not going to be a good for her. And I couldn't say that. I couldn't it would look selfish, and I didn't have the strength to kind of convince her of that. A month later, I see on social media that my brother's wife at the time, had liked a post for her. She was pregnant, and then the other girl I was seeing at the time, that was in Minnesota, because I was not in a relationship with anybody, also became pregnant with another man's child. So the two, possible relationships were both pregnant with other men. My brother's fully manic. I'm holding on to one class this semester that I couldn't go to, and it was just about that time to close the curtain.
It sounds pretty dire, at least from your mental side.
Oh yeah, and that was the same fucking winter that was the polar vortex. So it was, below zero for a month in St. Cloud. Shit, it was felt like it was negative 40 every day. So it was just a perfect storm. But luckily I escaped with my life, I guess, that depression. So since then, you asked what I have in place. I don't take medication.
Should you?
Yeah. Obviously, I agree with that.
Because I think, I have a relative that I believe is bipolar, and so does he and everybody else.
Jury's out.
But he will be fine when he's on his medication. Then he feels so good, he stops taking it, and then he goes down and crashes.
Yep.
And that's just been a cycle for 25 years.
Yeah.
And
that is very common.
It's, he's over 50 now.
Sure.
And he's been on this cycle for 25 years.
Yep.
So why aren't you on medication? Because I'm always trying to get him on medication.
Sure.
It's
So the reason I'm not is, I was forced. I had a stay of commitment 6 months after the hospitalization, right? The state of Minnesota made sure I was taking my meds.
Now, what does that mean?
A stay of commitment is they're your ward for that amount of time. When you get hospitalized and you get legally, forced into commitment or whatever, they become your kind of owner, and you have to kind of adhere to that, or you could get put back in the hospital. So I stayed on the medication until that kind of expired. But the reasons I don't take medication is, there's things like lithium. That's kind of what you're expected to take, right? And sometimes they'll mix that with an antipsychotic or something that'll, take you down a little bit if you get up. Rarely do we get antidepressants because they're worried that they'll just crack open, some mania. But lithium's awful. It's a poison. It's a toxic metal. And, I'd have to get blood tests to make sure it's not hitting a toxic level. And you feel it. You feel that in your strength. You can't function the way you should normally. And obviously people worried it's that normalcy or whatever leaving you out of it that you can't handle. You get up or down. But
now, do your loved ones fear that you'll jump back into another?
Oh, fuck yeah. So,
because you're not on meds.
No.
And that's your choice.
Yep.
But then that also opens up the door that you could go back into another episode.
Absolutely. So, what my strategy has been for a while is I saw this in a movie once. It's A Beautiful Mind. I don't feed appetites that, I crave for, right? I worked a job, and I'm going back to FedEx where I'm physical. It's not white collar. I'm not sitting in an office. I'm not just dealing with the stresses of a computer. I'm going out exercising. I can throw the shit out of those bags and alleviate some of that. So I don't work a career that really calls for my potential and all of it.
You mean take care of those bags?
Yes. Very gently.
Yes.
And so that's been one key for me. And also having a job with a schedule that's you can manipulate. So if I need a week off and I need to get the fuck out of town, go to Hawaii or go see some sun somewhere, I can do that. Or just not work. And Delta was great for that. I was able to I don't want to work this week, or I'm ready to work this week. I need some money. That's been key. And then also sleep. They always say sleep. So I don't stick to a super, schedule that I go to bed at this time and wake up at this time. But as long as I get 6-7 hours, even if I wake up after 5 and go do shit and then take a nap, gotta make sure you sleep. It's simple stuff like that. But then, you just have to kind of understand that it's a threat. And if you don't swallow that pill yourself, nobody's going to do it for you. My brother's kind of he's never given the illness its due kind of, credit. He's never kind of respected it, and he's paid for that with, the life he built, which he built an incredible one. And so for me, like, I'm getting rid of this debt that I told you about. My student loan debt will be gone soon because I know the weight that carries. I know that it can crush me and, break open that mania. The travel actually helped me. People worried, especially family, like, you have this access to just go anywhere in the world. That's going to actually be bad for you. But it hasn't been, because that ability to just go somewhere warm and kind of free up that stress of just, I'm stuck, I'm trapped, I keep using that word,
right,
has been great. And like, I couldn't just go take off, because if I don't work, I don't have that job, I don't have those flight benefits. So that was actually, it's been a really big key to my success, is during these winters I go sit on the beach.
So let me bring this up. Do you self-prescribe, like with alcohol or anything else like that, or you stay away from any of those kind of mood-altering things?
I mean, you see that in everybody, right? So I don't really. The closest thing I come to is I had some stressful things kind of in my, like, relationship and just things recently, and I wasn't smoking at the time, and I just smoked that shit back into remission, right? I picked up pack cigarettes and, like, started burning those things a pack a day. And I don't plan on being a smoker forever, so that's the closest I come. I don't drink or do drugs, like I don't smoke weed or anything like that. I don't look down on the people that do, because if you can self-medicate and get by, it's not the best solution, but if it keeps you functional and keeps you in the lanes, like, more power to you, whatever. What's worse, taking lithium or a few beers a night? I don't fucking know. So I don't do that stuff. I've never really enjoyed drinking heavily. Like, I'll have 3-4 beers at most, because I don't like losing control of my mind, because obviously that's been a nightmare in my life. I'm not, I drink enough fucking Red Bull and smoke cigarettes.
Cheers to the Red Bull, brother.
Yeah.
Let me ask you another question. And,
Yeah.
and I want to get back to the support system.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Because I think that's a key.
It is.
And you have one.
Oh, yeah.
You're married.
Yep.
And by the way, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Those are some ridiculous pictures with you in like a little, what was that? Tell me about that. I looked at those and I was like, man.
I need the story there.
Yeah, I want the story behind that.
Okay.
So why don't you explain the pictures?
Oh, Christ.
And then just give me the background, and then we'll get into the support system.
All right. So I met my wife on Bumble on October, a little online dating app. On October 7th, we had our first date. And I'd been single for about 2.5 years or so. And, I had, if you were there in 2016, right? August.
Yeah.
You were still working at Delta when we had that big fucking nightmare Atlanta thing where we were all working till 4 a.m. and shit was fucked because the system went down or whatever. And they gave us 2 free passes to go anywhere, confirmed.
I was in Mexico at the time.
Yeah, I was in Iceland. I was like, have fun at work, assholes. So I had those, right? And I told my wife this at the time. I said, I made this offer before, probably five or so times to other women. It's like, after during our first date, I was like, I can take you anywhere in the world for free. I don't have a ton of money to pay for the rest of the shit, but I'll get you there and back. And some females like the idea, like, oh yeah, but I don't have enough PTO, and like, oh yeah, but not yet. And that was kind of always like, well, you're afraid then. Like, I'm not, you're so caught in your job or whatever things, or you're afraid that, I'm going to kill you in your sleep or something, which are, sure, that's probably smart. So we met and had a date and went great. Spent the night, and the next day we, took a walk, took a nap together. Like, we were comfortable, and she had agreed. She was like, I'd go for it. I was like, well, when can you? She was a high school teacher at the time. Her fall break was coming up, her MEA or whatever. And so she's like, I'll do it. So we booked to Kona. And so we fly to Kona. And during this time, she had been in a previous relationship where she was close to getting married. She had the whole venue planned out and everything, and like couple dresses. And I had joked on the first date, like, we should get dressed up and just go on a date and just get free shit, right? You be in your dress, I'll wear a fucking suit and like get free dinners and drinks around town. she's like, I don't want to do that because I'd see somebody I know. So she's like, I'll pack the shit for Hawaii though, and we'll go do it for a night. So luckily, a deer had just smoked my car, right?
How do you have all these problems with your car?
Yeah,
especially since it means so much to you.
I know. So I was headed up to Duluth to my mom's place on 35, and this fucking deer was standing on the side of the road, and I'm going, 75, 80 in the left lane. And he's just standing there. So I start to slow down, pull over in the right lane, and all of a sudden he starts fucking sprinting at me. And I probably got down to like 50, right? But he fucking head down, took out my front left fender and both doors, like spun around, right? And like, it was completely functional. He broke off my mirror, or shattered the mirror. The mirror casing stayed on. But it was completely functional. So I got a check of like $2,600 right before this trip. So I booked us this nice Airbnb. It was like a guest house or guest room in like this, in the hills of Kona, right? And it's beautiful. So we get...
And just so people know, that's Hawaii.
Yeah, sorry, everybody. It's the big island. So we get there. And like we get, do some activities for a day, just awesome shit. Went to the volcano park, Black Sand Beach, and we get back and we have the stuff packed. So the next morning we plan to put it on, and we're like, hey, can you take some pictures? Like, nice lady, retired from like Michigan, like super, like maybe 65. She's like, absolutely. So we pop out. She's like, oh my gosh, you guys look. I can't believe you just showed up.
So
like
this
that.
is from that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so she's like, she had animals on her property, and she'd become like a therapist, like animal therapist, to help, people's whatever, kids and vets, whatever. And so she had these mini horses. Mm-hmm. She's like, let me set up something for you. I was like, yeah, definitely. And we come out later, and she has this mini carriage hooked up to this mini horse. And I was like, when shit presents itself like this to you, go for it.
Yeah.
And so she got some pictures of just Aubrey and like me and Aubrey, and that's where that came from. And we agreed, like, we're never showing anybody this. But
I mean, they're funny as hell, but they're strange.
Oh my God. Yeah. So that wasn't anything planned. It was just spur of the moment. Fuck it.
And then you decided to publish them.
Yeah. It was our 1 year anniversary.
Okay. So you published those.
We thought it would be cool to like put it in a frame and like bury it in the wall or something, and eventually somebody in the future would find it and be like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, I mean, because you're not a small guy, you're 6'5", and those mini horses look tiny.
And my wife is 5'10", you know. Yeah, so it's too good to, like, the one I posted, you got the picture of the fucking truck in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Like, too good to just keep to myself.
Well, they were hilarious, but they're kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get back to the support system, because I think that's really key to your future.
So my father has always been my greatest financial supporter. My dad had a very different upbringing, just like my mom. He had 6 older sisters. He was the baby, the 7th child, the last child. He's a different kind of guy. He's very emotional. He'll talk things over with you. Like when we were young, like he'd get upset and we might get hit or something. But then later in our room before bedtime, he'd come in and apologize and talk about why he did that. And come to, like, once my parents separated, he became a big financial supporter. Like, he always helped me with any kind of finances. Like I said, when I was 18, he paid for my apartment. Later on, even to this friggin' day today, he's still helping me financially. So there's a big support from him there. Like, if I ever needed help when I was younger, it was always there. During this 3-year monitoring period I told you about earlier, he's given me $200 a month for 3 years. And because, I can only make $16,000 a year. After taxes, that's maybe fucking $12,000, $11,000. So I'm not really getting by, if I have any kind of real payments of anything. So my dad's always been there for that. So that's a big support network. My mom, the same. They both remarried. She married a guy that's a little more monitors finances, let's say. So she'll send me things like postal money orders that can't be tracked. She's a U.S. postal worker, so I'm not worried about her husband.
Are you sure you want that out there? Because you could listen to this.
I don't give a shit.
Okay.
So she's always been there. And then, when it comes to real support, it comes, my best friends. Because if you don't have good friends, you really don't have anything in this world. And obviously my wife, too. But like my best friend I told you about, this Chris, he's like probably a half mile from where we are right now. He invited me in, right? And this guy had gone through 2 tours, and he came to St. Cloud after with his GI Bill and bought a house and just fixed it up over time. and he kind of took in strays and stuff. I helped him a little bit here and there. Like I cleared out a room and found a renter for him at one point. But he would just sit up. He didn't work very often, like a actual, like, you know, demanding, like you have to be here this time job. He would do some, you know, contract work or like do like web design. And he would just sit with me at night. You know, he would talk to me about whatever, you know, and he's a great listener. He's a great, like, he's got, for being 32 years old, he's got the wisdom of somebody that's, you know, 10 times that age or whatever.
That'd be 320 years.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty old,
Absolutely.
That's a lot of wisdom, dude.
Yeah, 3 lifetimes of it. And so that's always been a key. You know, with my wife, you know, one of the big reasons, you know, if she asks like why I married her, if other people do, you know, she can listen to me talk and keep up. You know, she can talk to me about the crazy fucking ideas that come into my head and, like, you know, the things I'm passionate about. And, you know, I can get those things out and I can get good feedback, and she comes up with things that I don't, you know, and helps me. And, like, that's very key, is just kind of talking and getting that out.
So how did you break the news to her?
Which news?
Did you just say, hey, listen, I'm bipolar.
Oh, yeah.
I've been in the mental hospital.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
been doing all this stuff.
Night one.
And she didn't run.
No, night one. Because maybe, well, not night one. I probably lied there. Probably 4 days after we met, we had like our, maybe, you know, second date or something.
Come to Jesus type
conversation.
conversation.
Because I was just like, you know, I'm not going to hide that, especially if we're about to take this trip. You know, I'm not going to, you know, so I very straightforward. Like, hey, you know, I've been diagnosed bipolar. Like, I didn't want to tell you our first date because I didn't want it to be you constantly get thinking that and just getting to know me. So yeah, I just told her, I said, you know, I've diagnosed bipolar, been hospitalized X many of times, and she asked some questions, and I'm just, whatever you want to know, I'll tell you. You know, on my Facebook, like, I've written some things about, you know, my experiences in my life, and so once her mom and I became, her mother and I became friends, she like, it's like, do you know that he's bipolar and this and that? And she's like, yeah, he told me. Yeah. First week we met.
Yeah, well, good. That's good that you did that.
Yeah.
You know, now how does being bipolar affect you today? I mean, from a standpoint of how you integrate and work with the world around you. I mean, do you do anything differently than, let's say, I would do?
Sure. I mean, it's not like it's, you know, a big difference, but like I told you before, like, there are some appetites I just won't feed. Like, if somebody wants to, in their career, maximize their potential, I usually won't. Like, you know, I've done some writing and stuff, but I've never really tried to, like, dig into my absolute pit of my, you know, soul or whatever and tried to work on something or, you know, give my full effort in something because I'm worried that I, you know, might kind of crack into that, break something open. Otherwise, you know, like I said, I work a schedule that's more free. You know, I'm never going to work 9 to 5, 50 weeks a year in my fucking life. Like, I don't think anybody should, but that's one thing I'll never do. The one thing that sucks, once you're diagnosed and once you've been through, you know, an episode or whatever, is everybody in your life, every emotion you have becomes a symptom. So if I'm happy or if I'm upset, then it's just...
You're getting scrutinized, maybe.
Yeah, it's constantly like, oh, you might be manic, or this might be a sign of this. You know, you can't be happy anymore. You can't be angry. You can't be any of those emotions that could look like something symptomatic of an episode. So that's kind of a difference. But the cool thing, you know, I'll talk about some of the fun shit is, I mean, when I go way up, you're in a different world. Like, you know, the things that I'll tell you, and I don't think everybody experiences this, like maybe my brother, I can read people extremely well when I go way up and just kind of sense things, right? Like, because I think you kind of turn off all of, you know, your processes, like your thinking and all the shit, you know, your reasoning, you just kind of turn that off and you just kind of feel people out and feel situations out. So, you know, I can kind of tell people's presences, like when I get fucking nuts, you know, and I can just like, this person's a piece of shit. I need
just
to
like the
this.
dog.
Exactly.
Just like the dog.
Exactly. And that was a real, you know, defining moment. Another thing I'll tell you about, which I don't know, the wife might not enjoy. This past winter, about February, she was off in Atlanta for training, and I was just walking through the airport, and I was like, I kind of felt like a pull, right? Like when I was walking just to our gate from like security from the bus or something. I was working on like G11 or G whatever. And, I was like, what the fuck? And so I just kind of like, tried to test out with it, and I got really excited. So what I could do is close my eyes or just look down, and I can navigate from our bus shelter, the upstairs of the concourse, to my gate door without looking. And like just listen to my legs. It was like I was kind of being pushed around, people walking at me. I would divert them. Like I would do like this weaving motion. And, it wasn't like symptomatic for me because I wasn't crazy up. She got scared because I told her about it, which I probably shouldn't have when she was away and in training under those stresses. But, I really explored with it. I'm like, let's see what this thing can do. And my mom flew it at one point, and I was going to meet her there, just have breakfast with her before she flew. And I was like, okay, I don't know where she is. I obviously have an idea. I know where her gate's going to be. I know she has to come through TSA. I don't know which one she'll come through. But so I was like, take me to her, and at the right time. So I just kind of got out of, our stairwell, where exactly that is. And I started just kind of letting it go. And it kind of looped me around for a little bit. And, I did this big kind of curvy laps kind of in the area where that brew pub is now. And then all of a sudden it set me on a direct course. And I go right to her. And all of a sudden there she is. And I get there right at the moment where she's gathering her things and putting them together after the TSA. And her bag tips over as I get there. And I grab it as it's tipping over and placed up. She says, "Hi, didn't know you were coming."
So what does that mean? Like you have like some kind of like
yeah, that's my superpower. I can avoid walking, I can avoid shit when I'm walking.
With your eyes closed.
Yeah, great fucking power, huh? So I think that just means that I've learned through all these episodes to kind of turn off some of the rationale and the fear. Because most people would be afraid to run into somebody or a post or, they would be afraid. So your mind kind of kicks off that instinct. And I think I've kind of learned to just, shut that down and just trust kind of whatever it is. I don't know if it's my heart or whatever is sensing things, because I've seen some studies about blind sight and this and that, because I looked into it. So I just think, we are more powerful than we know, and kind of this world that we've boxed ourselves into is kind of got rid of some of those baser instincts. I can't like fly or do some shit like that. But, we are definitely creatures, and I think there's some things, we let go or we put down.
Do you think that's from childhood? That we are brought up in a world that we are told is black, but it could be gray?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I get off my fucking soapbox when I talk about just how crazy the society is we live in. Like, the whole thing, like I defined earlier, you go to high school and go to school, and then you go to college, or you don't go to college, you get a job, you get a house, blah, 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 all that shit. And then you like work as a servant in servitude for all of your functional years, for 30, 40, whatever the fuck amount of years. And then you retire and die. Like, that's fucking nuts.
It
like,
is.
It's fucking nuts, and people always ask me, like, it was like I would get some jealousy and like anger that I'd be fucking traveling all over the world, and I have less than 16 grand a year. After tax I have maybe 12, but obviously with free flights, and if you're willing to sleep on the fucking beach for a night or a park bench or in a hostel, you can do all those things, because I value at this point time. So yeah, I absolutely do think we're pitched to society by whoever created it. Obviously my mindset is always it's the owners of society, which are usually the most the most capital.
Well,
and everything.
I think, and don't get too crazy on this, but this is my thing. Back in 1865, they abolished slavery.
Sure.
But they created a new kind of slavery.
Absolutely.
And the slavery that they wanted is more of a free slave, but a slave, nonetheless. Yeah. And that's what we are.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you buy into that slavery, we're all slaves.
Oh, yeah.
Some sort of some way.
I agree.
We are. I heard, can't remember the guy's name, but basically they just changed the plantation.
Yeah. So
you know what I mean? They changed the rules, they changed it, but it's still the same.
100% agree. So I took a master's level, graduate level history course, American history course, and it was great. It was by this doctor. She was the professor, Dr. Mary Wingard. And, it went over from Jamestown like every 50 or so years. and how they just continued to come up with a new way. Like, it's land ownership, right? Or it's, the oil or the railroad barons. There was always some kind of powerful sect of society that made you a servant to them. And, like, once that was discovered, we'd have a war, or we'd have, World War I or World War II or civil rights, some kind of eventual, people couldn't take the shit anymore and they actually did something about it. Or there was such a major event that, whatever, the elite couldn't say, we're not going to let you live a good life. After World War II, I think that was the best time in America as far as income inequality and quality of life. Like, and the reasons I would draw for that are like the GI Bill, right? Because you had free fucking college and then access to home loans, so you could own a home. And obviously it was a boom, as far as employment and everything, and people respected each other. And the top tax income rate was like fucking 90%. I mean, which, fuck them. Like, I don't know, like our CEO or Delta CEO, if you make whatever with your, benefits each year and your dividends and stocks, like if you're making 10 million, you can fucking afford to contribute 8-9 million because you still have $1 million fucking dollars.
Well, do you still say that? Will you say that about Kirk Cousins, who provides nothing for you? But a CEO provides you with food,
with a
provides
job,
you with a direction and a
sure.
job. Where somebody that plays professional sports provides nothing.
Oh, if you want to get into my beliefs about professional sports, I think they should all be fucking removed. Like, I think college should be the absolute top, and I think you absolutely should pay those fucking guys. Like, not like it should all be a set rate, right? So you're not recruiting based on how much you can pay.
Right.
College sports should be the pinnacle. The fact that we have built that piece of shit in Minneapolis, the Bank Stadium, and like, it's crazy. They fucking play, 9 games in there a year? Like,
9.
I would rather they fucking use the U.S. Bank Stadium to store salt in the winter.
That would be a lot of salt.
I know, but we might need it, you know?
Well, I want to ask you another question.
Yeah.
As you go forward, do you look and see where you want to be in 10, 20 years? Or is it a day-to-day process?
I absolutely look forward. So, this big thing for me is the release of my student loan debt happens mid-March. So, like, I've been counting down the fucking minutes, until that happens, because then I'm free of that. I like to think that I live my life the way I want to, but I certainly am still under the constraints of my life and society. Like, once that's gone, I can do whatever the fuck I want. And that means I can actually earn a livable wage, and I can buy my cabin, that's kind of what the wife and I want, a dog. Like, that's going to be no problem for us. Like, we don't have kids, we don't want kids. Like, buying a cabin and having a classic car, like, that's pretty much all I want. And being able to get to that finally, I look forward. So in 10 years, not really. Like, I want a fucking cabin and a dog. I'll do whatever makes me happy past that.
Right.
So there's not a whole lot of future planning other than like the next year to two, you know. But not day to day. I don't like, what do I need to do today?
I'm going to ask you one final question because we're hitting our time frame.
Shit.
What, if any, correlation is there between you and your brother both having bipolar? Is it genetics or is it upbringing or what is it?
It's absolutely genetics. And then, yeah, you can, I think it can be drawn a few different ways. Like, this is a weird analogy to use, but like, I don't know, my beliefs with, I guess I'll just start with, bipolar. Like, my uncle is bipolar. So
your uncle too.
He killed himself. So he's in the past. He jumped off the High Bridge in St. Paul. So that was, I don't know, 2001 or 2 or something. So it's genetic. It definitely came from my mother's side. My dad's side has some, emotional distress problems and stuff, anxiety and stuff like that. But it definitely came from her. It came.
So
from
it was
there.
your mom's brother.
Yep.
Okay.
So my mom had 5 brothers. So yeah, it's definitely genetic. My sister, I have just a brother and a sister, older brother, younger sister. She never got it. And it kind of seems like that's kind of typical, is like it's passed through the female. but they might not experience as much. So my sister's gonna have to worry about her children,
Right.
you know, as much, you know. And obviously it's not perfect science, but my brother has 3 kids now, and I honestly I don't worry about them experiencing it as much, but I do worry about if my sister has sons or something. So it's definitely that, and I think it's kind of unavoidable. I think there are life instances and circumstances that will get it out of you faster.
Mm-hmm.
But it's coming. You know, that train is definitely on its way, regardless of if you live a perfect life and you're, you know, completely secure in all your things. Because yeah, it's no joke. Like, you know, obviously I've had to deal with it my entire life, entire adult life for sure, and it's a blessing and a curse. You know, everybody uses that line, but it is true. Because I wouldn't be the person I am today. You know, just talking shit, saying whatever I want, taking on management, you know, at our company, and taking on whoever in an argument on the street or whatever, without having gone through what I've been through. You know, I wrote a lot when I was in 2012, and I wrote about the power of tragedy, because I don't think you're a real human or a real person with real values until you go through something tragic. Like, I mean, maybe we all don't need it, but for the most of us, they do. Because once you go through tragedy, and if you're able to pick yourself back up, you actually have real values. You know what has value. You know, I value time and relationships, and the experiences I get with that time and with those relationships. Because at the end of the fucking, you know, the end of the run here, am I going to look back and be glad I had a bigger house or a nicer car? No, who fucking cares? But I'll care about, you know, me and a buddy, you know, breaking into some shit, or like, you know, getting into some kind of trouble that was a blast, you know, like, that's what I'll care about. And the tragedy as I've gone through, as I would see, is like, obviously my hospitalizations. Like, I had everything taken from me. You know, you take my shoelaces away, all my possessions, I'm locked away in my freedom. You know, I would have rather been in jail than those mental hospitals. But once you get out, I valued my shoes with fucking laces. I valued my ability to get up and go to Subway, you know, to get food. Like, and I really started to know what I wanted, versus, you know, the people that never experience anything and their toilet backs up and that's the end of their fucking life.
Right.
Like, you know, and I think you the older generations see that, you know, a little bit, like, things are so impactful or whatever to the younger generations. But I don't know, some of us have gone through some shit, you know, and I'm not too young at this point. I'm 32. Like,
that's still young, man. I don't even remember 32. Put it that way.
So yeah, I don't know. It's been an interesting life, and I think I'm finally getting to the point, you know, where I'm gonna get to be who I want to be and have the things I want to have, and
good.
We'll see what goes from there.
Yeah.
Not running.
With that, my man, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
You are going to be doing well, I have a feeling.
Yeah.
So keep the train moving down the road and keep it the way it should be.
Keep it on the rails.
You'll be good.
The crazy train.
The crazy train. With that, we'll say goodbye, and everybody, thanks for listening. Take care.